Welcome to our continuing series, Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis. Today, in our series, we take up the subject, desire, and look to the writings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother for guidance and enlightenment. Some of you have written to me, a number of you in fact, asking if we would do a series on desire. So this is part 1 from Sri Aurobindo. You do not seem to have a correct idea of the nature of vital desire. Vital desire grows by being indulged. It does not become satisfied. If your desire were indulged, it would begin to grow more and more and ask for more and more. That has been our constant experience with the sadhaks, and it confirms what has always been known about desire. Desire and envy have to be thrown out of the consciousness. There is no other way to deal with them. In the conscious mind, that which was still only a vital hunger in subconscious life transforms itself into higher forms. Hunger in the vital parts becomes craving of desire in the mentalized life, straining of will in the intellectual or thinking life. This movement of desire must and ought to continue until the individual has grown sufficiently so that he can now at last become master of himself and, by increasing union with the infinite possessor of this universe. Desire is the lever by which the divine life principle effects its end of self-affirmation in the universe, and the attempt to extinguish it in the interests of inertia is a denial of the divine life principle, a will not to be, which is necessarily ignorance, for one cannot cease to be individually except by being infinitely. Desire, too, can only cease rightly by becoming the desire of the infinite and satisfying itself with a supernal fulfillment and an infinite satisfaction in the all-possessing bliss of the infinite. In another passage, Sri Aurobindo writes, "The desires come from outside, enter the subconscious vital, and rise to the surface. It is only when they rise to the surface and the mind becomes aware of them that we become conscious of the desire. It seems to us to be our own, because we feel it thus rising from the vital into the mind, and do not know that it came from outside. What belongs to the vital, to the being, what makes it responsible, is not the desire itself. but the habit of responding to the waves or the currents of suggestion that come into it from the universal Prakriti. The rejection of desire is essentially the rejection of the element of craving, putting that out from the consciousness itself as a foreign element, not belonging to the true self and the inner nature. But refusal to indulge the suggestions of desire is also part of the rejection. To abstain from the action suggested, if it is not the right action, must be included in the yogic discipline. It is only when this is done in the wrong way, by a mental ascetic principle or a hard moral rule, that it can be called suppression. The difference between suppression and an inward essential rejection is the difference between mental or moral control and a spiritual purification. When one lives in the true consciousness, one feels the desires outside oneself, entering from outside, from the universal lower Prakriti, into the mind and the vital parts. In the ordinary human condition, this is not felt. Men become aware of the desire only when it is there. When it has come inside and found a lodging or a habitual harborage, and so they think it is their own and part of themselves. The first condition for getting rid of desire is, therefore, to become conscious with the true consciousness. For then it becomes much easier to dismiss it than when one has to struggle with it as if it were a constituent part of oneself to be thrown out from the being. It is easier to cast off an accretion than to excise what is felt as a parcel of our substance. When the psychic being is in front, then also to get rid of desire becomes easy, for the psychic being has in itself no desires. It has only aspirations and a seeking and love for the divine and all things that are or tend towards the divine. The constant prominence of the psychic being tends of itself to bring out the true consciousness and set right almost automatically the movements of the nature. Demand and desire are only two different aspects of the same thing. Nor is it necessary that a feeling should be agitated or restless to be a desire. It can be, on the contrary, quietly fixed and persistent, or persistently recurrent. Demand or desire comes from the mental or the vital, but a psychic or spiritual need is a different thing. The psychic does not demand or desire. It aspires. It does not make conditions for its surrender, or withdraw if its aspiration is not immediately satisfied. For the psychic has complete trust in the divine or the guru, and can wait for the right time or the hour of the divine grace. Desire takes a long time to get rid of entirely. But if you can once get it out of the nature and realize it as a force coming from outside and putting its claws into the vital and physical, it will be easier to get rid of the invader. You are too accustomed to feel it as part of yourself or planted in you. That makes it more difficult for you to deal with its movements and dismiss its ancient control over you. If you want to do yoga, you must take more and more in all matters, small or great, the yogic attitude. In our path, that attitude is not one of forceful suppression, but of detachment and equality with regard to the objects of desire. Forceful suppression, parentheses, fasting comes under the head, end parentheses, stands on the same level as free indulgence. In the other, it lies latent and exasperated by suppression. It is only when one stands back, separates oneself from the lower vital, refusing to regard its desires and clamors as one's own, and cultivates an entire equality and equanimity in the consciousness with respect to them, that the lower vital itself becomes gradually purified, and itself also calm and equal. Each wave of desire, as it comes, must be observed as quietly and with as much unmoved detachment as you would observe something going on outside you, and must be allowed to pass, rejected from the consciousness and the true movement, the true consciousness steadily put in its place. It is no part of this yoga to suppress taste, rasa, altogether. What is to be got rid of is vital desire and attachment, the greed of food, being overjoyed at getting the food you like, sorry and discontented when you do not have it, giving an undue importance to it. Equality is here the test, as in so many other matters. It is not necessary to have desire or greed of food in order to eat. The yogi eats not out of desire, but to maintain the body. It is true that the mere suppression or holding down of desire is not enough, not by itself truly effective. But that does not mean that desires are to be indulged. It means that desires have not merely to be suppressed, but to be rejected from the nature, In place of desire, there must be a single-minded aspiration towards the divine. Namaste.